PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film. We come from bi-weekly to twice in 1 week.
Damn, you cut me off.
I did. I got that the first time without any. I think the first time I ever completely beat you on that, huh?
I didn't even try. I saw you getting all revved up, and I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to let him go. Because I feel like you need this win because you have to go out and shovel snow later. And I don't. Yeah, see, look at that motherfucker. Don't you mess with me. This is what happens.
I'm looking out my window right here. It's still coming down. It was snowing all night. It is like Hoth out there. I got to get my tauntaun. I had to get my tauntaun ready. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be fun.
And they smell bad on the outside too.
It's true. I'll smell bad on the outside and the inside. It's not going to be fun.
Yeah, that's fair. Wow. Yeah, we went from, hey guys, we need to take a break to now we have to do 2 episodes in a week. That I would really love to thank Paramount for deciding to release Scream 6 the same week that we had to do Lethal Weapon 4. You guys really just making me feel good after a long week of work.
To be fair, we could have decided to push Lethal Weapon 4 off to our next show, but that would mean we'd have to cut back on one of our post-Lethal Weapons, but post-Lethal Weapon 4-part movie saga where we're picking Lethal Weapon-like movies, and we didn't want to just take out any of them that we had talked about. That's the problem.
No, we thought about it. There was a half second it almost happened.
It did, and this would have been funny too because Lethal Weapon really would have been extended out because we already stopped once, I believe. We had an intersection once. I think that's when we did the DC movie slate at one point already.
Yeah,
over 4 movies. This taking a long time to get through 4 movies of the franchise. I mean, it's always going to the point where it's going to take longer to do Lethal Weapon than it was to do Halloween, and that's just not funny. It's not funny anymore.
The funniest thing about that is you and I, by the time we got to the end of Halloween, there was almost a sigh of relief. Not that I don't love every one of those movies, but I was happy to have it behind us.
No, exactly. It was kind of like, exciting. We have to move on and talk about something that's not Michael Myers, as much as we all love Michael Myers so much. Yeah. And of course, what do? We set up to do Friday the 13th later on.
Yeah. Well, we all make choices in life, apparently.
I'm sure it's going to be similar at the end.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, so we're here to talk about 1998's Lethal Weapon 4, a film that I'm pretty sure most of you listening have seen, and it feels good, by the way, that I don't have to keep looking at like a live chat right now. Not that I don't like interacting with people, but I'm back to just being able to just talk.
I agree. I mean, we definitely did this when we started this whole process out. We had toyed with it being live, and we said, no, it's not a good live show. We should do this just a conversation between the two of us. Let us not be distracted by live chat, and we can really get all our information out. But every once in a great while, especially with like a newer movie everybody just seen, everybody's excited about it, it's nice to have that interaction. But yeah, but for the most part, this is definitely better without the live distraction because we're just
it 100% is. So if you haven't already, you should go listen to our Scream 6 review, though.
Yeah.
Plug. We have a whole breakdown on Scream 6 and what we think it's going to do moving forward, if you will.
Yes.
And we talk a little bit about Scream 7 and the franchise. And actually, I'm going to talk to you about... I'm not going to talk about any of what we talked about. For obvious reason, because we are an unrelated Scream podcast, and I don't want to spoil anyone on the movie, the poor bastards who walked into our screening after the evacuation and had the third act reveal ruined.
Poor guys, poor bastards,
poor bastards. I have an expansion on my theory that I want to talk to you about later.
Okay, all right, fair.
Yeah, I have ideas.
You have a lot of ideas. I mean, you always have a lot of ideas. You're always pitching stuff to me, and I'm always like, man, you're insane. And sometimes I'm like, man, you're awesomely. That's a fucking awesome thing. Sometimes I'm thinking, God, PJ, go to bed. Just stop and go to bed.
Oh, I mean, I could go to bed right now if you really want to. It would not take me long to,
No, see, your Scream 7 pitches though were really great though, so I don't want that. I like you when you talk to me about those ones. So
someone should really just give us a little bit of money to run a 2 mediocre white dude studio. because I think
Ooh,
we could make a
bank.
yeah, I think we could make bank for the audience. I'm just saying they'd get their money's worth on some of the ideas of things that have been floating around in the old brain.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um,
uh,
so anyway, here we are talking all things Lethal Weapon 4. I almost said Scream 4, and I was like, nope, wrong. Let's dial that back and start again. This one's interesting because this is a non Jeffrey Bohm, non almost any of the like Shane Blackness.
mm,
It is a totally different movie written by Alfred Goff, Miles Millar, and Jonathan Lemkin. Now, if you recognize the names Alfred Goff and Miles Millar, you're gonna go, wait, the Smallville
of
guy?
the guys? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And then some of the rest of you might go, "Oh, dear lord, it's the dudes who wrote Mummy 3: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor," and, starring Academy Award winner Brendan Fraser. So, your mileage may vary, and now I'm realizing that movie also has Jet Li.
That's true. That's
What a
true.
weird I hadn't even thought about that until this moment, but that's kind of a weird-ish reunion
Yeah, I guess
for
so. I
that.
didn't think about that
Um,
either.
but it's kind of different because this is and Channing Gibson also wrote it. Apparently, the story took 3 people,
In the
which is
screenplay.
the Goff, the Millar, and the Lemkin to get to whatever this movie is, and that's not, like, a dig, but
No,
this was a movie that came out in 1998. It shot, like, just months before the movie came out. There
right.
was, like, no turnaround time, so because of that, the budget was severely more expensive than all the other movies. This movie cost closer to, like, $120 million for them to make, and that's probably not just as we know, the actors all got paid.
Right.
It's a 4th movie in a franchise, a very successful one at that.
Absolutely.
But it also was because the story and the movie took so much time for them to finally get there.
Yeah, it took a long time because they initially had
It's
tried
a
to
5-year
buy.
gap.
Yeah, they went through a couple different iterations of things. Obviously, they tried to buy the Jonathan Hensley script. Simon
Mhm.
Says, which
Oh,
I
you
guess
guys might
originally,
recognize that. Yeah.
funny enough, for my personal taste, was originally planned to be Brandon Lee's next film after The Crow. Or maybe they might have made it into a sequel for Rapid Fire, his other one. That they're
Mhm.
kind of trying to develop Brandon Lee because Brandon Lee, quite frankly, if you've ever heard me talk, talk about The Crow, I think we should do The Crow at some point because I love that film so much. I really think if Brandon Lee tragedy hadn't happened, he would have been possibly the premier action hero of the 1990s. He was set to be the action star. He had dramatic chops, everything else. So this is exciting to me. I'd love to have seen that develop. But things happen. Things happen. Unfortunately, tragedy struck. Fox took it again at that point, though, and then they decided to turn it into what we know as Die Hard with a Vengeance, which is why Die Hard with a Vengeance screams to be so much of a Lethal Weapon movie. To be honest with you,
Mhm.
it makes sense. But yeah, they didn't quite work out. So it took a long time to get going.
Yeah, and so then at one point, Joel Silver had scripts for 4 and 5 being
Yeah.
written at the same time. They were gonna shoot them back to back, but then Mel Gibson said he didn't wanna do anything more kind of period, which put things on ice, and this went on for a while. Like, Jeffrey Bohm came in, and he actually did write a treatment that was
Mm-hmm.
rejected, which is why he's not actually involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it went through so many issues
Yeah.
to get here. And it seems like the Bohm version at least had triads and things like that. So there was certainly DNA left over because it seemed like that was the way that they absolutely wanted to go. And I think they were really chasing the martial arts market of the time because Jackie Chan movies were getting very popular very quickly over here because, Drunken Master, you had Rumble in the
The
Bronx,
Bronx.
First
Yep.
Strike, and then of course Jet Li, some of his movies were slowly starting to make their way over here, but he hadn't quite popped off yet with
Right.
some of his American productions
Mhm.
because this actually is his first American debut film.
And that was a
Uh,
big deal. I remember, even at the time when it was first published, it was like, "This is Jet Li, star of these, is coming to America," and he was. It was a great setup for the whole thing.
absolutely, it was huge, and they ended up really leaning on that. They even put him on the poster. He's the
Yep.
only one of the villains in the franchise who made it on the poster.
Mhm.
They
And rightfully
sold this
so.
movie on him.
Rightfully so, I think, honestly speaking, because I mean, point blank, I'll say he's probably the best villain of the series. I mean, you could make a pitch that Busey from the first one was good, but he didn't quite have the same charisma, the same draw power at that point. At that point for him, as far as like villain goes, I mean, the two other villains we already talked about. We thought the three's villain being lackluster overall, not for any fault of the actor, but Josh Ackland, of course, great, but not exactly a poster villain for the film. Jet Li was that perfect action villain that really could sell because, of course, being his debut, he had that cult following already. Bringing that made a lot of sense to pitch it that way.
Mm-hmm. So eventually, the movie starts shooting in January of '98,
January of '98. That's
and it
amazing.
is releasing in July.
Shooting in January, out in July. That's insane.
It does not finish shooting until May.
That's insane.
This movie shot for 5 months because they had so many script changes as it went. Again, this production was kind of a nightmare. It cost a lot of money. If you go back and watch the original trailer and teaser, there's definitely deleted scenes and alternate footage that was excised from throughout. I mean, most trailers are that way in general if you pay attention, but this one is one of the more egregious versions, I feel like.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
because so many things had changed as it went. But the one thing that didn't change is that, like every other Lethal Weapon sequel that has come before, the addition of new cast members mixed with the old cast members is alive and well. You have Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, now regular Joe Pesci, the return of Rene Russo. You have Ellen Trainor. You have Tracy Wolf, Darlene Love. Like everyone you recognize from these movies is back. Plus now the addition of Jet Li, plus now the addition of Chris Rock.
Right.
And Rock being the newest addition to the family, if you will, because he plays Detective Lee Butters. He's this young detective in the police department, which now in hindsight, the whole jokes with him potentially being in love with Murtaugh maybe hasn't aged very well.
No,
But
definitely
he
not.
actually has a relationship with Rianne that they're hiding from Roger because Roger doesn't feel like he wants his daughter dating or married to anyone in the police force, which is typical because he knows what it's like to put people through that, especially because he's put his family through so much already.
Again, the house of the Murtaughs, the worst place to ever live.
Oh yeah, the Murtaugh house might be cursed at this point. But what's interesting is this was actually the first Lethal Weapon movie I ever saw.
Oh, was it really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very interesting.
Back when this hit VHS, my mom was part of that Columbia movie club.
Right.
You know, the one that if you ordered 12 movies for $1, you had to buy however many later or whatever. But this was one of the movies that came in the monthly subscription after the fact.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And so I don't even think we owned the other ones, but this was one of the ones they sent. And so my cousin and I were like, well, this looks fun. And we put it on and I loved it, but I was 8 years old, having no idea that I had never watched any of the other ones or anything. And it wasn't until later going to Hollywood Video that I found the other ones. And I was like, oh, there's more of them.
The 4 didn't tip you off?
Well, it could have just been Lethal Weapon 4. We've seen plenty of movies like Magnificent Seven. That is not the 7th movie in a franchise.
So there's 4 Lethal Weapons. There is Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Chris Rock,
and Chris Rock.
Russo. There you go. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Because it's definitely not Joe Pesci.
No, definitely not Joe Pesci.
So I was very young. I didn't think about it. It could have been, it could have been Magnificent Seven. I don't know. And then I found the other ones and I fell in love with those all over. But this was my first introduction to Lethal Weapon. And I even remember the marketing.
I just got to cut you off real quick and say how funny that's because considering how much of a series capper this is. This is very much. I mean, I know we're talking about doing a 5 now at this point, years later, but this very much put a cap on the entire series and built on everything that came before. It's kind of funny to think of this as your first viewing without. I kind of wonder how that is to like see without everything. I mean, I guess at 8 years old, you're just like the wham bam action kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna say at 8 years old, I didn't really care. Like, I was just
right,
having fun with the action, and I mean, I just remember being like, "Oh my god, there's a dude with a flamethrower in the opening." Like, stuff like that was just so amusing to 8-year-old me that I was just kinda like, "Whatever." You
right.
know? I don't understand the rest of it. I also remember I think this was one of the very first, like, R-rated action movies that I had paid attention to, where there was a lot of swearing, and it was like, "What is happening right now?" And I was so like, yeah, almost like, "Should I be watching this? Am I breaking rules right now?"
Well, rule breaker.
Even though my parents had taken me to see The Rock in theaters, like,
No way.
it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't super surprising, but even then, watching it without my parents at that age, it was like, was I breaking rules? Was I doing something wrong? So this movie holds a special place in my heart for a lot of reasons, and one of being this was my first introduction to the franchise.
Right.
And it helped me fall in love with these characters in a way that here we are. I'm 33 now, so I've had some time with this franchise.
Absolutely.
But it all comes back to the fact that this one was the first one I saw, and I do remember all the marketing for it and stuff too, though, because I remember it being kind of like a big deal when it was coming out.
Right. Right.
It still ended up being one of the top 10 grossers of the year. It was the second highest grossing film in the franchise worldwide, but it underperformed here.
I remember
It
that.
didn't Yeah, it did, like, it was kind of weird. It didn't make as much here as people had anticipated, but, like, the worldwide gross overall, it made, like, 200 and something million, which was enough for it to be considered not a runaway success, but, like, worth the gamble, and as it was, by the time this had gone into production, the idea of a 5th film went out the window. They realized that they would probably never get Gibson to say yes again, so it was kind of rewritten to be a finale in that
Yeah.
regard.
Right.
And it's so funny that so many versions of the scripts they wrote were tried to be used for other movies in the future. Because I think like Murder at 1600 was another one of the Lethal Weapon scripts at one point that
Yep.
didn't get used. There was a potential Demolition Man sequel at one point that one of the scripts was kind of used for. This one this one went through some stuff.
It really did.
And you can
It
kind
did.
of feel it. I'm going to be honest. Like in hindsight, you can kind of feel the Frankenstein's nature of this film, if you will. Um,
Right. That.
it's thrown together with action sequences. The story is on the weaker end of the franchise, and that's not a complaint. I
No.
love this movie, but it's definitely on the weaker end because it's strung up together with some great fucking action sequences.
And I think it actually helps that they try to end it with this because there's a lot of little bit of nostalgia ties and things like that that kind of give it a little bit more uh chemistry, a little more glue that puts it together. Because quite frankly, like, it's impressive to me how good the film is considering everything we just said about like the short span of time. I mean, this is an action movie. This isn't like a small, like, one house drama. You can do
Yeah,
that in a couple months. And from January to July. And with the action set pieces that we have, that's amazing that they got it done, and they got it done so cohesively, to the point where like this is not, even though it is a little bit Frankenstein, and you can tell, like, it's not
it's
to the
not the
detriment of
most
the film.
egregious.
Right,
Yeah, I
exactly.
mean, we've seen many, many worse. Like again, I will point to Suicide Squad as one of like the most largely offending Frankenstein's monster films of all time.
I got that.
You know what I'm saying? Like there are movies, and we're not talking Guns, the Suicide Squad. To be
Right.
clear, we're talking Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
The
The Academy
movie.
Award winning Suicide Squad.
Oh, stop that! Don't do this. Don't make me want to throw up on camera. Um, yeah, I mean, there's much worse offenders in the nature of movies that have bad productions
Right.
and multiple edits and like studio tomfoolery, if you will.
Good way to put it.
The fact that Gibson and Glover and Pesci and Russo and Rock are all in this movie. The fact they have Jet Li, the fact that Donner's still directing it, no matter how bad the production ended up going and how rushed it all ended up being, those pieces end up making this movie actually really good,
Yeah.
which is such a nice surprise because, man, I would have hated if this movie had been like Die Hard 5, which there's another one. Let's talk about a franchise ender, if you will,
Yeah.
that is so bad that it plays against all the rules. You can tell the production was troubled. You can tell that they didn't know what they were doing, and that movie is awful.
Beyond awful. That's not even a
Yeah,
movie to me, and it's really sad. One of the like, I mean, we're never, and obviously at this point, we're never going to get a chance to make a fifth or sixth and final one. Obviously, with the tragedy of Bruce Willis's career at this point, I mean, that was always something I'd held long to, that we could maybe eke one more out, even though it'd be an old man McLean kind of thing. That would make it a better note to go out on. It's kind of always going to be a tragedy that's the last get. I mean, besides the Die Hard commercial, that the battery commercial,
yeah.
this is the last Die Hard we're going to get, was that one. I kind of already block out of my mind, to be honest with you.
The bummer of that is for multiple reasons, but to your point is that they had those scripts. And actually now, you know what's funny is in hindsight, the Die Hard Year 1 stuff, as hard as we were all on the idea of them doing it was a hybrid sequel prequel. It was supposed to be kind of Godfather 2-esque, where it was going to have Old Man McLean, but with flashbacks to the Year 1 stuff. In hindsight, that makes sense why they were trying to do it. I don't think they were ever trying to be upfront with it.
Right,
We've
right,
talked about, and I've told PLD in the past, but like this stuff going on with Willis was kind of an open secret for a while in
right.
Hollywood that people kind of knew, but never wanted to be the ones who said what was happening with him, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm now realizing in hindsight, part of why they were probably trying to do that hybrid film was to take a lot of the pressure off of
Wait,
Willis having to do a lot of a
yeah,
movie like that so that you could have another actor doing the things in it that you have to have an actor of that type do in a movie like that.
right.
But they courted him a few times with ideas, but now we know why. But there was a great script called Old Habits Die Hard that really would have made a just significantly great finale, and it would have made up for a lot of the stuff that happened with 5, but alas, it was not to be. And for me, Die Hard ends with a good day, or with a Live Free or Die Hard, because a good day to Die Hard can go fuck itself. So
Right on.
thankfully, to the point of all this, Lethal Weapon 4 does not fall into those traps. And I think that having all these original pieces in place down to director really helps them go, look, even through a messy production, stuff we're doing, script changes and things, we can make a movie that feels like Lethal Weapon and people will get on board with it. Like that's just kind of that.
Well, part of it is, honestly speaking, that like unlike Die Hard 5, it's the characters coming back. Like Lethal Weapon is the only franchise I can think of, honestly, that you never really lose a cast member. It just keeps growing and growing and building on. I mean, you had like the Lethal Weapon was buoyed by Joe Pesci in the second one, Rene Russo in the third one. They all come back, and they all come back for the fourth one. It seems like it's just a building cast. It becomes a family, and when you have characters that you love like that, like, it just makes anything that was be a weakness or a weakness, they kind of like, that's all right. It's all right. I still love watching these characters interact because they have great chemistry, obviously, between them. Joe Pesci added to that. Rene Russo, we talked about that last episode. Rene Russo, I would have watched a trio of Glover, Gibson, and Russo, or I would watch a Russo and Gibson spinoff kind of thing. Like they
Mhm.
had, she had that instant chemistry with them, and Joe Pesci did too. Like I said, so like when you have that kind of chemistry between four, and then additionally with like the Murtaugh family, so to speak, it's an easy thing to watch. So that anything can be kind of glossed over when it has that kind of characterizations.
Well, and with Donner at the helm, you
Yeah,
know that you're going to be able to
consistency.
get that, and
Yeah,
it'll work out in the end, which is, I think, a testament to you know, the film as a whole, the family as a whole, if you will. And even the tagline for the movie was "The gang's all here." Like they
yeah,
really leaned in on. They knew that that's what people wanted,
right, exactly.
and it's so funny that it was only a 5-year gap, but they treated it like a long time coming legacy sequel. You know what I
It
mean?
really did. Yeah.
Which is very funny in hindsight because it's like it was only 5 years, but here we are, like you and I at least are like salivating at the bit to go see Indiana Jones 5, which was a 14-year wait. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whew.
Whew, that made me feel real old saying that out loud.
Considering the gap between Last Crusade and King of the Crystal Skull, and then you have the other 14. Like, jeez.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, exactly. So the fact that Lethal Weapon 4, despite all of the issues, or in spite of rather, ended up being a really fun series capper that really leans on the past of the franchise in the right ways, leans on the characters in all the ways it needs to elevate this over being just like a cash-in fourth
right.
film that they shouldn't have made.
Right.
And it ends up being a movie that I can't not watch when I watch all these through because it feels like a proper ending. And I think that we've even talked about this going, with the potential of a fifth movie because it keeps lingering on the horizon. These ideas that it might be happening, it might not be happening, et cetera, et cetera. Like Gibson might be directing it now because Donner has passed away. They were going to shoot this year, but now the Discovery merger may have, pumped the brakes on that. We don't really know.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be honest, it's hard to look at this and go, why even do it? Because this movie feels like an ending.
It
Like
really does.
a very proper ending that I don't really want messed with.
Not only that, it feels like what I just said. That was part of the big reason for the success of this film, and the franchise in general. We do Lethal Weapon 5. We don't have Donner anymore. We don't have obviously Joe Pesci. I don't believe would make an. I don't think he'd come back for this. I mean, maybe he would be a small part, but he's definitely not the same Joe Pesci to be Leo
No.
Getz at this point. It doesn't feel like it would feel like you would feel that those missing, I think, and that's just not what Lethal Weapon does. So it kind of feels strange to me. I mean, yeah, I get that it's Gibson and Glover one last time kind of thing. Even that just feels a little wrong at this point, given their age and everything else. I don't know what they would do. I mean, I'd give an open mind. Of course, I'd go see it. Of course, I'd see it when it comes out. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the franchise, and at least with Gibson helming it, that gives me a little sense of consistency because at least, I mean, the Gibson of it aside, if anyone's going to helm it after Donner, it's someone that's close to the family like that. So that does give me some thought of optimism. But overall, there's a little bit that I'm kind of like, I don't know if we should do this.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at this point, where I'm like, I'm not sure I want the movie at this point.
Right.
I think we've passed it. And I mean, here's the other thing: we just know that it's going to lean in on the kids that are born at the end of this one. Spoiler alert! But Rianne has a daughter or son. They have a child.
I can't remember either, actually.
Mel Gibson and Rene Russo have a child at the very end.
Right.
And so, it would also lean on that.
Right. It would have to. And rightfully so. I mean, like, honestly, considering this whole thing's about family anyway, I think that it would be wrong if it didn't.
Yeah. But it also feels like instead of it being a proper final chapter, because they keep saying it would be called Lethal Finale. It
Yeah.
kind of just feels like it would be a potential springboard for more also because,
Yeah.
and I don't need that at least right now. And this is me being hard on it, probably sight unseen if it even happens. But there's something to be said about the consistency of how this franchise has evolved, and I don't want it to be strung out longer than it has to. I mean, it already kind of got messed with in a way as it is with the TV show.
Yeah, which I never watched. I'll be honest with you, I never watched it.
I watched it. It was one of those, I kept watching it, hoping it would get better. It started better than I had anticipated, and then just kind of became exactly what you expect out of a procedural called Lethal Weapon on television. And of course, then there was the behind the scenes issues with that show.
Right.
Which led to Riggs being killed off in the show. So Lethal Weapon, the TV show, managed to kill Riggs before the movies ever did, which I think is almost some sort of like sick cosmic
Joke.
comedy almost, where it was like Shane Black so badly wanted to kill Riggs for so long, and the universe was finally like, here you go, Shane Black. Riggs dies in something, but it's a TV
TV
version of the
series.
show.
It's not Mel Gibson, right?
Yeah,
Just so you know, Riggs has a son, and Rihanna has a daughter. I looked it up.
that's what I thought. Okay, so it was Rianne had the daughter. That sounds so bad because we're talking about it, but I couldn't remember the order of which it
Yeah,
was.
no, I agree. I was the same way, dude. So I get it this way. And you're right. That's what it'll do. I gotta say though, I will say about Lethal Finale, if it does happen, as much as trepidatious as we are, I can guarantee you, if that trailer comes out and it's like a decent trailer, we'd probably be all in.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. It'll be kind of like the indie trailer. The moment you hear the John Williams theme start to play and you start to see like iconography that you recognize, like the hat being picked up, I'm done, man. I'm in. It doesn't really matter. Like if I hear the jazz music start to play of that Lethal Weapon theme, it doesn't matter. You know I'm watching that movie.
Absolutely.
Like,
All that's all it takes is one of them to say, I'm too old for this shit. And you're like, yeah, you are, but we're gonna watch it
you are.
anyway.
You've been saying it since the first one, and we love it every time. I'll be there opening day. But that, this is a Lethal Weapon 4 podcast,
Right.
not a Lethal Finale podcast, because we
Right.
can't really keep talking about a movie that doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and talk about Lethal Weapon 4. Again, to the point of what we were talking about earlier, it's crazy to think like this is a huge franchise. People don't realize how big it is. Again, the fourth movie was one of the top 10 highest grossing movies of that year.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And it really is. People don't realize the hold and the magic that this franchise really does have for people. And so it seems like it was very palpable that people were excited for it. You could tell that people were ready to watch it. Like, again, I remember the marketing using the tagline, the gang's all here. I really, as a kid, should have known that there was more of these movies, but what are you going to do? But this movie ends up being a lot of fun. It leans in on the fact that Jet Li is the villain by having, the whole story revolves around like money laundering again, but through like a Chinese gang, basically triads, with Jet Li as like their enforcer, and these refugees who kind of know exactly what's been going on, and Murtaugh is taking care of these refugees, and they kind of get in, wrapped up in this story that in this kind of mysterious money laundering plot. And honestly, again, the plot is kind of whatever for the rest of the movie because it really leans in on all the action beats. And this is the one movie in the franchise, I think, that you can say the action is put before the story.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's kind of for the better because the story is real paper thin.
Right.
But the action beats in this movie are maybe the best of the franchise.
Oh yeah, they lean in heavily on all the martial arts stuff. Of course, Riggs has always been touted as being like having martial arts capabilities and everything. I mean, pale very much in comparison to anything Jet Li's going to do. But he gets to lean in on that a little bit, which is nice because he gets a little bit more that way. It also leans into, instead of being like the story itself is thin, but it's more about the emotions that carry the film as well. We have last film in Lethal Weapon 3, we had Danny Glover starting to feel really old and Mel Gibson kind of covering for him. This time it's Gibson's turn. Riggs has a couple of moments in there where he's feeling it, like the sparring session.
The sparring session is a great version of it.
Or he can't quite make anymore. A lot of times he's just not, like he had that one action beat, he does it as well, where he jumps after Jet Li, ends up not quite making it, falling down the roof or whatever, because he's not quite the same guy he was 10 years ago, as it were. He's starting to feel his age, and Gibson puts on a great performance where he, like, you can tell it's bothering him. He's still pushing forward and everything else, but he's kind of battling his place in this world, just as much as Danny Glover was last time. Of course, Danny Glover isn't any younger, but he's still pushing it as well. They always keep pushing.
Yeah.
They had that great sequence too. Like you see them together in the locker room afterwards. I'm gonna will this into happening. I'm not too old for this shit. I'm not too old for this shit.
It's so good, and it's a great character moment for them in general for how far these guys have come. But even to see Riggs start to kind of grapple with that is interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. It's great to see. Of course, you also have the same thing that happens as far as his age goes, his relationship with Rene Russo. What a great relationship they have. Like, it's such a unique relationship on film. So many other characters and writers would have played that dynamic very differently and very poorly. I think it would have been poor for the story. You have Rene Russo pregnant in this film. Well, I think was she really pregnant in real life too? I think she might have been.
Honestly, she might have been. I'm really not
remember.
sure.
I thought she was, but I could be completely wrong about that. That's how good she was if that was, was the case. But it does put her character a little bit in the background, action-wise this time. But we do get these moments where you get to see Mel Gibson struggling with the whole idea of marrying because he doesn't want to settle down. She
Well,
really wants him to settle down after everything's gone down. Obviously so. He's been put in this situation before. Obviously, before the first film, his wife died, and the second film, his girlfriend dies. He's used to putting his women in harm's way.
Yeah.
In danger. Of course, Rene Russo being a cop and being as badass as he is kind of like what ends up tipping the scales a little bit. But it's kind of interesting seeing from Renee's side, because I feel like a lot of times they would have written that character to be like not a damsel in distress type, but like she's like annoying him and she's like gonna be mad at him for doing it. She never is mad at him for not wanting to take the plunge, so to speak, until you get to the end when she's in labor. And that's a different story. But it's different. It's a different kind of supportive way that shows exactly how amazing that this character really is. And she's one of my favorite parts of this entire movie because of that.
Oh, 100%. Although I'll say this, the only bummer of it is that Lorna is basically chalked up to not getting action beat, which bums me out because I really liked Renee in the last one, and I really would have liked her to be able to get in on the action. So it is a little bit of a bummer that she's regulated to that, but at the same time, it's also because of the mirror that, as we know, Rianne is also pregnant. So there's extension happening on both sides of this family right now. And what does that mean and things like that? And we also have this reveal that Murtaugh's been coming into extra money. And you know, Riggs is not really sure where it's coming from. And he's like, have you been getting money off the top? Like, I won't say anything, but you know, what's going on?
Right.
Because he's kind of getting ready to retire again. And this idea of having some extra money for that. And I love the reveal is that Trish has been writing bad
trashy
romance novels. And I always think of when it's all because it is Rene Russo who tells Riggs exactly what happened. And I always think of that scene when they're walking together and she goes, "Oh, Riggs, you can't say anything. I shouldn't be doing this." And the way they're so funny in the way that she reveals it, but it's revealed that she's been writing like trashy romance novels for extra money for the house, which I just think is incredible.
What is the author's name that I forget what it is now. God, that would have been a good showdown question to be able to see back in the day.
Back in the day when we would have done something more specific like that, it really would have been. We didn't really do that towards the end, much to the frustration of certain people, which what are you going to do? We had to do a very specific task, and we did the task we were told to do.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. I can't remember I want to know that's that quote or whatever. Anyway, I remember the author's name and like that great sequence. Of course, they have these great comic moments about their life during action beats. That's what happens in these films. They start talking about it during the action beat, and like he's like, "Are you bopping? What's her name?" He's like, "No, I'm not bopping. What's her name? Trish is her. What's her name?" So you are bopping. What's her name?
Yeah, I am bopping.
I guess I am bopping. What's her name?
I think it's so. It's so good.
It's so Lethal Weapon, which is what I love about it.
Also, I gotta say, I love that this movie opens up with the random dude with the flamethrower who's torching Los Angeles.
We have a great action beat to begin with. That's what Lethal Weapon does. It has to do the rest of the film as a cold open, and I'm okay with it, though. It's okay.
But it's the best. It's so funny and so hysterical. And this dude's just listening to like loud rock with this flamethrower, and then Riggs convinces Murtaugh to take his pants and shirt off and run around in his boxers and make noises like a chicken to distract the guy.
I have to point out there, this is for me only. Well, actually, a little bit maybe for Mark Ellis. The Rock is Van Halen, but not just Van Halen. It's Van Halen in the one album that Gary Sharon was lead vocalist for Van Halen on. an underrated album for me. I love that album. Everybody hates that album, whatever. If you ever
No, it's
saw
a great album.
the live version of Gary with Van Halen, all the eras, it was a great time. But this is their way to try to get them over at that point. Didn't quite work, unfortunately. But I remember going, because I was a huge fan of Gary Sharon, and when Gary Sharon joined Van Halen at that point, this was like their first big splash. It's going to be Fire in the Hole is going to be in Lethal Weapon 3, Lethal Weapon 4. I was like, oh, so I went there. I got to see him listening to him, like, oh, this is great. I got to see Gary Sharon saying Fire in the Hole with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover in the background. It was great for me. But
oh
yeah.
no, that's excellent. I love that. But it's such a great opening, and I love that at one point he goes, "Hey Riggs, you think that chicken thing worked?" No, not at all.
No.
What?
I want to see if you do it.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if you do it. No, spit, Riggs, and he gets all mad and then walking back. Oh, it just off the bat, like as the movie opens, you realize that we're in exactly what we're anticipating. Like in the chemistry hasn't changed in 5 years.
Right.
The action beats haven't changed. It's still as fun as it ever was, but feeling, a little harrowing. They even like toss a giant truck in the air. It's a pretty huge opening. And again, they spent money on this movie with all the changes and stuff, but God, it works. Which then leads to like the inciting incident, if you will, where Riggs, Murtaugh, and of course Leo Getz are out on this boat in the water, and it's Leo's. What is it? It's the boat, and they tell Leo to go do something, and they. What is that? Yeah, that's a fucking word. The way he says it, and why didn't you just say go left? They're yelling at each other on this boat. It's such a perfect sequence because, again, going off the first one, now you see that the chemistry with these three hasn't changed.
Right.
And you're reminded that you actually like them quite a bit together. And it's just kind of this comedic bit because Leo catches a goddamn shark. And the shark ends up in the back of the boat. But then this giant boat comes up on them and almost, crashes into them. So Riggs decides to get up there. A firefight ensues. Then the boat that they were on starts to sink, which Leo starts to panic because now the shark is in the water and he thinks he's going to get eaten. But it's this great sequence where it's actually pretty tense. Murtaugh is trying to help keep the situation calm, but Riggs is up on this big looking, I don't even know. It almost looks like a Star Destroyer as a boat. But, he's in this firefight up top, and it's super fun. And it definitely leans on the exciting opening action bits. And again, because the script is on the thinner side story-wise, it works that we have basically 2 back-to-back action beats because it gives you all the character interaction you need while also pushing the story 20 minutes forward without really pushing the story.
Yeah. You think about 20 minutes in, like you still have very little about the story. It basically just introduces the immigrant storyline. That's about it. Like there's so much more that goes on after that. But it doesn't matter because you build up with these weapons that build up with the action sequences and you get the chemistry, and that's all you really need for a Lethal Weapon movie. Story is really secondary at this point.
Yeah, and again, you can get away with it with this film in particular. Right. And the thing I do like is that it really doesn't push them to be more than them either. Like neither of them go superhuman and all this. Like to your point, we talked about Riggs is kind of starting to wonder his place in all this because he's even getting old for it. And they never push them to less believable action beats in a way that certain other franchises might.
Yeah.
And that works for this opening with Riggs because he is kind of out of his element and he realizes that, and he's using a gun against dudes who have these like super semi-automatic type things, and he's just trying to use his brains with it, which I think is great. And he has that sight and he ends up using it to ricochet off one of the backs so he can shoot one of the guys who's shooting at them. It really creates this interesting dynamic where it's like Riggs knows he can't go into these things guns blazing the way he would.
Right. Absolutely.
Um,
It's a great
yeah,
way. And the best part about to me that it's subtly done. You kind of like see little bits where he's not quite. He's lost a step. They don't really push it though until later on. You kind of see it slowly develop. So when you do get that sparring scene, eventually you're kind of like you see it coming, and you're rewarded for that. And it makes that scene even more powerful because like a lot of times you could have in an action film like this, you'd have that scene kind of come out of nowhere. And you're like, I just saw you kick ass before. I just saw you like begin the film. You were kicking ass and haven't lost a step at all. So what is this? It's kind of a weird thing to do. The weapon they show you, they kind of sprinkle it a little bit off before they actually show you, so to speak. And I like that about the film.
mhm, totally. So to your point, then we end up finding out as it goes, like they find this immigrant family that Murtaugh decides he's going to take them in and try to protect them. I really love Eddie Ko. And I think the character of Hong is really great. And I actually
Yeah.
like his interactions in the movie throughout with Murtaugh. It was actually kind of an interesting situation. It also leads to some like terrible, it smells like Chinese food in here when Riggs doesn't know that they're staying at the house. And you're
Right.
like, oh, good Lord. Again, maybe some of it hasn't aged particularly well.
There are definitely moments where I kind of watched it because I watched it again, obviously, recently, and I was like, I kind of forgot that. Oh, yeah, I probably wouldn't go over quite as well. But it's of its time. It's of the 90s and everything
Yeah.
else. So again, if you've watched us before, you've seen us before, we are definitely people who are very forgiving of when films are made from the time, and we
Mhm.
grew up with them. It is what it is. You gotta understand that, like, yeah, we understand it probably wouldn't work in
It would
today's
not
world,
fly now.
not fly now, and I get it. And I would not saying it should fly now, not saying it's a right to have flown back then, but
No,
it
but we
did,
can
and that's
acknowledge it.
right.
Yeah.
And acknowledge it exactly. So
And that's all we have to do. We can acknowledge maybe it hasn't aged super well,
right.
but at the same time, it was of its time and it was what it was. But it it's also Riggs kind of doing that. I know that you're hiding something, and I'm gonna keep saying these things until you
Someone
finally come
breaks.
clean to me
Yeah.
because that's what he does. It's very much like the rubber tree
Yeah.
incident
Exactly. I like
in
that
Lethal Weapon
Lorna's right
2.
there. I like that Lorna's right there with him doing it too.
Yeah.
Like she's right there doing the same type of thing. She's like right there with because they're the same. Like Lorna really is a female version of Riggs, like just
Mhm.
a little more sane, maybe a little more sane, but like
Only a little though.
only a little bit more, right? And the funny you bring up the rubber tree. I want to actually throw back real quick. I love the fact that they kind of do a callback to that when they put the picture up. Well, Mel Gibson puts the picture up of of him doing the
Yeah.
chicken of Dave Love to the Chicken Man, and like and Danny goes, "Yeah, it's been a year, guys. God damn it!" He walks away, and you hear Mel Gibson trying to goes, "That's really rude, guys. If I ever find out, and he's the one doing
I'm
it."
gonna kick your ass. And the way he breaks as he says it, I'll kick his fucking ass, but he's starting not to laugh as he's the one putting the picture back up.
It's so funny.
Oh, it's so good, man.
Uh,
And the other thing is I love Chris Rock in this as Detective Butters. Butters ends up being a really great addition because he's the new Joe Pesci. In the same way that Lorna was the kind of new Riggs, this is the new version of Leo.
can I got to interject here? This
Yeah.
is, I think, the one time in this episode where we're going to disagree.
You don't like him in this?
I don't like Chris Rock in this, and the reason why I don't like Chris Rock in this is partially because of what we talked about. I think because of the film, I think because it was done with action beats and there was a flimsy story. I feel like a lot of times they used Chris Rock's shtick. Like a couple times where I'm like, okay, I'm listening to a Chris Rock comedy special now. Like they literally took his comedy special and put it into the movie. Like, and it took me out. Like the whole thing, like where he does the long distance dialing.
I
It's
love that.
it's funny, but it takes me. I feel like all of a sudden I've turned off Lethal Weapon. I turned. Oh, did we just turn to HBO the Chris Rock comedy special that we're doing? Okay,
That's
that's what
interesting
we're doing.
because it doesn't bother me at all, and part of it is because I think that since they had let Pesci so frequently kind of do his own thing too, it doesn't really bother me
I
because it
felt. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, I was gonna say because I know that Pesci wasn't like a stand-up comedian, but they kind of give him bits of his own that they lean on. So you're doing the same thing, and I wonder if Chris Rock had never been a stand-up comedian, you probably wouldn't feel that way.
You're probably right. You know, you'd absolutely be right because, like, with Joe Pesci, I didn't have that different side to see. I just saw him being a character actor. I don't mind character actors doing their bits a little bit. For some reason, this just took me out. There's even like lines of dialogue, like the whole what was it? You have the right to remain silent. If you call Johnny Cochran, I'll kick your ass. And as if it just felt like a stand-up comic bit, and that happened
But
quite
then
too
again,
often in
you
the
and
film.
I totally laugh at Lethal Weapon 3 when Riggs goes, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say ain't gonna be much." Like, it's just bad, one-liner
Yes, but
type stuff.
it just had a different feel for me. I don't know if it's maybe because I don't it's hard to see Chris Rock as an action hero. Maybe that's part of the reason why. Um, that could be it. But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, his antics just took me out because it didn't feel like Detective Lee Butters. It just felt like Chris Rock.
I also have to wonder if, and this is purely me speculating, Warner Brothers had him under contract
Mm,
at one point because remember he was going to play Jimmy
yeah,
Olsen
I remember
in
that. Yeah,
Superman Lives,
right,
which was a WB production. That
correct,
movie, as we all know, famously never happened.
right,
I wonder if part of why he is in this is that WB already had him under contract and had to give him something else, which is
right.
why the Lee Butters character is the way he is. And I also wonder, to your point, if they let him kind of ad lib some of his stuff, because I wonder if in contract they went, we don't really have anything for you. Well, here we're doing Lethal Weapon 4. How about we create this character around you? And so
Right.
they didn't really write a character. They just put Chris Rock does thing.
That is exactly what it feels like to me, and that's why it does take me out to a degree. Now, it doesn't take me out to like the detriment of the film completely. It's not like I actually really love this film. I don't mind him being in the film. It's just something that bugs me a little bit throughout.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I will never even I won't say that you're wrong. I don't necessarily fully agree, but there's a part of me that does understand where you are coming from.
Right.
I just have like a very different vibe on it where I'm like, it doesn't bother me because I already let the rest of these characters get away with so much most of the time that Rocks is no really different for me.
Which is funny. I guess I could see that. I mean, I'll throw it out there to you, and this might be part of it. You saw this when you were 8 years old. It makes a
Oh
difference.
yeah,
You see that when you're 8
100%.
years old. I mean, I saw this when I was a little older than you, obviously,
Right.
1998. So I was getting close to 20, 21. So at that point, I kind of saw things a little bit more clearly than I would have seen it at 8 years old. 8 years old, I probably would have loved it, laughed my ass off, and then it would have just kind of settled in. You
Yeah,
know what I
and I
mean?
think that's a part of it too. And I think the other thing is, again, because we've been talking about it so much, because so much of this movie was changed on the fly and things were done so kind of weirdly haphazardly, everyone is kind of riffing in the movie. And I think that's very interesting because it feels like there's a lot more ad-libbing in this movie than
I
say
agree.
any of the others.
I agree. And I think part of
And
that, though, the reason why it's acceptable for everybody else has been there for long enough. So I kind of feel like
oh yeah,
they're home there. That's why it works for everybody else.
no, totally fair. It's just very interesting. You know what I'm saying? Because you look at it and you're like, everyone's kind of doing it. Now, there's clearly stuff in the third act that is very specifically written, and I'm very glad because it feels
Yeah.
like they're trying to shut the door on the franchise so that everything with the monologues and stuff at the very end, that is not ad lib. But
No.
all this
Right.
kind of character interaction stuff, there's the scenes where they're on the gas because they're trying to get information from Benny Chan, which is one of my favorite scenes. The with Kim Chan. Kim Chan's a really great,
Legendary.
legendary character actor, and they go into Chinatown to get information from him, and it's full of Riggs and Murtaugh and Butters saying pretty insensitively racist jokes at him and Chan spitting back at them about all of it. But then they decide that they need information from him and they know he's at this dentist appointment. So they go in and they turn on the laughing gas and they're all on this laughing gas, which leads to these like back and forth reveals of information about characters being pregnant and who's having the kids
Right.
and who the parents are. And it all feels very ad libbed.
Right? It does. It really does. But it does work with them as a group for some reason. I don't know why.
It does,
Comparatively,
but
I do love it though.
I love it though, and that's my point. Is I think that even the stuff with Butters in particular is probably let Chris Rock be Chris Rock because everyone else is having to do it too. But we've been with them longer, so it settles easier in your mind because you're like,
Yeah,
oh, that is just them. For you, and again, I really had no interaction with Chris Rock at the time when I had originally seen it. To me, he's just Lee Butters because I didn't know any better.
makes sense, and that makes sense absolutely. And I don't want to ever say it was a big deal to
Oh
me,
no,
because I do. Again, this definitely didn't like ruin the film for me at all. Just one little negative thing about it that I definitely get over. So
no. Hey, I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeling like that. I
absolutely.
could tell you you're wrong, but I don't want to be an asshole about it.
That's true. Well,
That would just be
and
mean.
you don't want to be wrong when you say that, so it's okay. I get that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be, but that's okay. That's
That's
fine. You know, it's good. But I really want to talk about this though. We've
right.
bounced around it a lot. Jet Li is the villain of
Yeah.
this film, and boy, man, I'll give them credit. Donner, to his credit, to the team at WB, no matter how this production went, no matter what happened the way that it did, I have to say, Jet Li is a force to be reckoned with in this movie, and I love that they made his villain so intimidating. They don't really make him have any dialogue of
Which is
sort,
smart.
which I think is smart because, yeah,
Mhm.
I think it leans on his ferocious nature as a martial artist. And dude, he is actually scary in this movie. And I think he might be my second favorite villain in the franchise.
I honestly think he might be my favorite villain in the franchise. I'm not gonna lie.
I can't,
Um,
I diplomatic immunity will always be.
I get that, and I don't mind that. A little that to me has grown a little bit on the cheesy side to a small degree. I still love it, but comparatively, I love the fact that like we can watch the sequence in the Murtaugh house again, and he doesn't have to say a word, and he can just watch from the stairs as the action beats unfold around him, and he just doesn't care, and he's just like watching, and coming down with
And then
his
he
like.
inserts himself.
And then
Yeah.
again, when he does insert himself, it's like, oh shit, you guys are in deep fucking trouble now.
Mhm. Which lead, dude, the fight sequence with them at the very end of the movie
Oh yeah,
is so excellent on the dock. It really lets Lee feel ferocious, and like the fact that Riggs almost dies in it is such a really deeply dark, unsettling thing because honestly, because it felt like a finale, it kind of felt like they might lean that way until
yeah.
obviously it doesn't. But Lee really sells it, and the action beats are great. You see that Riggs and Murtaugh are too old for this shit.
Well,
Like
that's just the
they
best
are.
part about it, though, is not, but they aren't, but they are because the whole thing that's built up from the beginning fight sequence through the sparring session is that Gibson's lost his touch a little bit, and they get this moment where Jet Li kicked their ass at the house, and so they have this moment where like, well, we can walk away. We should probably walk away because he'll kill us. We
Mhm.
can't do this. We should go get back up, and we'll get him another day, live to fight another day, kind of thing. But they can't do that. They can't. That's
No.
just not in their nature. So they turn. They have that great conversation where Mel Gibson turns. Just like, go, you know what though? He did that cool thing. I gotta ask him how he does it. I think I gotta go ask him how he does it.
Yeah.
And it's at this moment where and Glover gets all resigned. Like, I guess we're gonna fucking do this shit, aren't we?
Yeah. Which is
It's just
great. It's a
great, right?
great character moment.
Exactly. I gotta because it's very Riggs. Riggs can't walk away. I didn't think he can't walk away. I did actually in the theater go, I wonder if Riggs is gonna bite in this one. It would kind of like make a
Full
bittersweet
circle.
ending. It makes sense. A full circle bit. But I love the fact that him and Jet Li go at it. Danny Glover gets his moments where he's trying to battle back. Like he doesn't get a lot of fight sequence because it's not his fight. He's not the martial art physical artist kind of guy. But he tries. He gives it and he but it makes it more believable that when Riggs does kind of win, it's because that Glover does have his little moments to play. So it
Mhm.
ends up being this great physical confrontation. You get to see the best of Jet Li, his ferocity in there. You can get to see Riggs and Murtaugh at their best, and it's barely enough between the two of them.
Yeah, it's so awesome. The pier finally collapses, and you're still really not sure exactly how it's going to go. Riggs kind of gets lucky that he finds that fucking gun in the water and he ends up
Yeah,
being able to kill him.
right.
But like it's such a tragically great finale that they really shot the shit out of it too, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They
Oh
really
yeah.
did. It's one of my favorite sequences, although my favorite action sequence in the entire movie is probably the freeway fight. That whole thing is so well done. It's very reminiscent of Lethal Weapon 2,
Yeah.
uh, with them in the Murtaugh house as it's being rebuilt, but this is one that's a moving car. Like, when you see trucks going down the road and it's got like demo house stuff that they're clearly going to go put in a suburb, they're fighting in that.
That's so good.
It's
That's so
so
good.
good, and, like, you even get, like, a table drag sequence with one like, it feels so cool and so well done, and because of when it was done, it's done physically on a real freeway. It's not being done with like, on a soundstage, and
Right. Exactly. You got the
it adds to the coolness of it to me because sometimes, I think I forget even sometimes because I love superhero movies. I love the stuff that we watch year in and year out.
yeah.
There is something about the physical location usage and actual action beats like this that just remind me how tangible and how much better that stuff can be. And because I've been watching so many Jackie Chan movies lately, because I'm kind of going back into that deep dive on his filmography, God bless, man. Like I love those type of action beats.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I can't agree with you more. Superhero bits, Star Wars bits. I love watching the volume and the sound stages, and but there's something specifically about these like action beats that are real in your face, and you can tell, you can feel the ground underneath your feet, kind of thing. That's why I loved, for example, I'll throw it out there. I loved Ambulance from a couple years back. I kind of felt like that kind of reminded me of that kind of action beat story
Well, it's
making
Michael
again.
Bay.
And that's what makes sense. Exactly.
Yeah.
Michael Bay does that kind of stuff. That's what he thrives on. Give me more. By the way, I'll say it again. Give me more mid-level budget action films because we need more of them. To be
Well,
honest with
that's the stuff you and I have talked about that
you,
like
for
ad
years.
nauseum. I feel like at this point because John Wick started like that. Bad Boys for Life kind of actually was that, all
Yeah,
things being equal. Those kind of movies are great, and Bad Boys for Life did a great job of that. Now, the third act of that movie gets a little wild
wonky.
too,
Yeah,
a
wonky.
little, but not in a bad way. But it's a
No,
lot more. There's a helicopter sequence. They're not going to crash a real helicopter on those guys, but like
right.
that movie reminded me that, oh yeah, 90s action movies were the best. Like that was the best version of a 90s action movie not made in the 90s outside of the Wick films.
Yeah, absolutely. So bring those back, man. Bring those back. But this is exactly what you're talking about. Going back to Lethal Weapon 4, that freeway sequence is exactly that. It's also a callback, a lot of callbacks from the rest of the franchise, which is why this is such a great finale. To agree, sorry, Lethal finale. This is a great finale because it does remind you of that Lethal Weapon 2 sequence as well. There's a lot of callback action beats as well as dramatic beats that make it kind of nostalgia, considering it's only 5 years since the last one.
Yeah, it's kind of funny again how this one feels so heavily like almost the prototype for legacy sequels
Yeah,
because honestly, you could almost have never seen 3 other than the Lorna stuff and gone into this one off of 2 and it would have felt like a legacy sequel at that
yeah,
point. Then you're looking at it, just about a decade at that point.
yeah.
So in that regard, maybe that's why they did it that way. But it's just interesting that you look at it and it's like all the stuff we talk about now when it comes to legacy sequels, you can kind of point to it here because
Yeah.
this one was looked at when they went into it and they went, we're just going to make it a bookend. So much so that the movie literally ends with a scrapbook that shows pictures from the creation of all the movies and all the cast and all the crew together making the
Yeah.
movies. And actually, you know, we all know that song, Why Can't We Be Friends? And it's been in how many movies and how many TV shows, and you've heard it so many times. But the one time I think about it the most, the one thing it reminds me of always will be Lethal Weapon. And the
Same.
reason why is because of this. Like
Absolutely.
it plays over the end of the movie, and you're seeing all these behind the scenes photos. It's actually one of the coolest sequences I think I've ever seen as far as like wrapping something up and giving love not just to a franchise, but to like all the actors, to all the crew, to everyone who worked on it. Like you're seeing crew member pictures, you're seeing pictures of Donner, you're seeing just like makeup and hair design and like the choreography. It is so cool and it's so unique. The closest it comes to, and it's not the same, but Avengers Endgame has an elite level finale credit sequence, similar to, because it's saying goodbye to a lot of those actors in those roles and them doing the signatures as it pops up. And I want to say Undiscovered Country does something similar.
Yeah.
Because it was the final Star Trek film to feature like the entire core original Enterprise cast. And so I want to say their credit sequence is something similar too.
I don't remember that one, to be honest with you. So you could be right, you could be wrong. It's been a while since I watched that one, so I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I will say, it does do have a credit sequence like that is Rocky V.
Yeah, Rocky V has got it too. And of course, the Scream movies all kind of end in a very similar fashion too, but it's more of like a clip show CW montage, less like a love letter to an entire series and its production.
Right.
But I think it's just kind of nice and kind of fun. But before we get into that, the other thing is that the movie feels like it wraps up every storyline it possibly can in the final 20 or so minutes. And that's the other thing. This movie's ending is another 20 minutes before it's finally over once they've defeated the villain.
Right. But it's needed. It's so necessary. It would feel empty. I feel like it would feel empty without this, because there's so much that happens in this wrap up that just is so important to the characters. It's so important to a finale. It just wouldn't feel nearly the same without it. They could have wrapped it up really quickly. They could have technically wrapped it up at the end of the fight. They could have done that, but it just wouldn't have been the same at all.
No, it really wouldn't have. And I gotta say, I think we touched on it in one of the older podcasts on the franchise, but it's actually my favorite moment with Leo in the entire series, because they finally really let Pesci act. Not saying that he wasn't throughout the movies. He's great in these movies.
Right.
But he's dramatic Pesci.
Yeah, he's like, a shtick in the rest of the franchise.
Yeah, like he jokes a lot. He's got a very specific character note and beat that he's having to hit, and that's not a bad thing. But it's super nice to have dramatic Pesci show up and be this guardian angel, if you will, for Martin in the moments that you start to have. And I love it because he goes to the graveyard and he knows that his kid is going to be born soon, and he knows he's going to have to
Riggs, right?
Yeah. Give me a second.
Nope.
Sorry, I'm gonna dial that back a little bit and start again, because I was getting distracted because I heard the growling before it started.
Gotcha.
And I was hoping that it would dissipate before I started going into it, and then they did that. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna dial that back real quick, and I'm gonna literally pick up basically where we were about the shtick.
Gotcha.
Hopefully, you'll be able to edit it together. I apologize.
We'll make it work.
Yeah. I was just very happy that the shtick version of Leo is kind of put by the wayside as this guardian angel for Riggs, because as we know, Lorna is about to give birth and he's still having the back and forth on if they're going to get married, should they settle down. And we have this great sequence that is at the graveyard at the gravesite of his late wife, and he's kind of talking to her and he goes, I really don't know what to do. I don't want to have what happened to you happen to Lorna, but I think it's time to settle down, but I don't know how to let you go either. And like, am I doing the right thing?
He's asking for permission.
Yeah, basically, like he's asking for permission, and as he's doing it, Leo shows up.
Well, he asked for a sign. That's the best part. He asked, show me a sign. Give me a sign, something that this is okay. And then all of a sudden, of all people showing up.
And he even says, I think you have a weird choice of guardian angels. Or
after it's over, yeah, he does come back.
It's over. But it's this great moment where Leo starts to talk about how he really never had friends and he had this pet frog named Froggy. And even at one point, Gibson goes, we're terrible to you, Leo. Like, we're terrible to you. And he goes, no, but you love me. Like, regardless of no matter how you treat me, you guys are been my family and you've taken care of me. And it's like this really, it's really sweet and it's really great. And it just shows how much you love these characters because you watch it and you're like, holy shit, dude, like this rules.
I gotta say that it's weird. I'm glad that Riggs says that because it's very true. If you watch 2 and 3 and most of 4, they are pretty terrible to him.
Oh,
It's like
they're
he
absolutely terrible to him.
he loves them, and kinda he always goes back to them. He's like the puppy dog that, like, they not abuse, I don't wanna say they abuse, but they kinda do. It's like they kick him around, they're whatever, they're shooting his tires or giving him proctology exams, they're doing all sorts of crazy shit, like, I don't understand, why would you go back to him? And yet because he has no friends, he's kind of this sad character. He comes and he accepts it because he thinks that they like him because he's picking on him. And Riggs gets this moment where it's a turning point where he's like, you know what? He really is. I might not like the guy a lot, but I do kind of love having him around. Riggs comes to that realization during the speech. He's like, you know what? We are terrible to you, and yet you come back for more. You are really loyal, and I appreciate you for that. And it's just this great turning point on so many different levels. And it comes from the story of a pet frog named Froggy. And it's like, how is a pet frog named Froggy story making me like tear up a little bit, considering everything?
Yeah.
But it
Oh,
turns everything
100%, man.
around. It solidifies it. It's the most important speech, and it might be the most important bit in the whole franchise. It turns everything on its corners, and it really solidifies the whole group as a family. And of course, it goes even better when they get to the hospital.
Right. And so once they get to the hospital, they start doing the of course, because, in typical lethal weapon fashion, Rianne and Lorna give birth at the same time
Of course,
because of course, which just feels so poetic.
right,
But they decide to get married as it's happening, but not actually get married. But Lorna is like, I just need to hear the words before I give birth. I won't give birth to this child unless we're married, Riggs, which is
I
so
love that.
hysterical. So they find a rabbi, and the rabbi is doing the thing, and it's such a great moment because you realize also how much they actually do love each other, that they're going to do that. You know what
Right,
I'm saying? Like
yeah,
it actually works. And of course, as it's going on, Steve Kahan as Ed Murphy shows up, their captain, and there's this great moment where they're all inside and they're gonna go take this picture, and Leo goes and he gets a disposable camera so he can take a picture of everyone, and they're like, Leo, what are you doing? You need to be in the picture, like get in here, and then the captain's gonna do it. And
right.
they're like, no, you need to be here too. Like, so they hand the camera off to one of the
Somebody,
nurses,
yeah,
and the nurse is like, what are you guys all friends? And the last line, no, we're family. And it's so good. And
right.
it could be so cheesy.
It is so cheesy. It is very cheesy, but
But
it
it's like
works.
earnest. And
Yeah,
that's the thing.
absolutely.
People don't realize that when it comes that people complain about stuff being cheesy all the time, but
Right.
there's a difference between being cheesy and being earnest. And the movie is earnest about it. So even if it's a cheesy moment, it's so earnest that it feels right
It's earned. It's
and it's
earned.
earned. And that matters. And I think that people get lost in sometimes cheesy is just cheesy.
Yeah,
But cheesy when it's earnest
it's
is actually
great.
kind of heartfelt and you don't really care.
Because life is cheesy at its best moments. Let's
Yeah,
be
and it
honest with
should
you.
be.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it should be, and we should be earnest and honest about how we feel about things and how we interact with people. I think in a world that the fucking Hallmark movies are so goddamn popular, what the fuck are all you people doing complaining about stuff being so cheesy and earnest when we should be earnest in how we talk and interact with people? And that's why I love that this movie goes, fuck it. We're going to end on like the most
Cheesiest
earnestly
possible way.
cheesy moment possible that these characters have earned over 4 movies.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I agree with you. You couldn't I couldn't have said it better than you, so I won't even try. But I
I
do
sorry, I got very passionate about this type
I
of
love
movie.
it. I love it. In fact, though, like what I do want to touch base on my favorite moment of the hospital kind of is a extension of the Frogger sequence where like they get in there and Riggs and Leo are together. Riggs goes in with Lorna, and at first Leo kind of starts coming in, and they say, "You can't go in. It's just just a family or something like that, whatever." And like door closes, and you see Leo kind of be like, "Yeah, here it goes again. Oh well, yeah." And then Riggs comes back out. He's like, "You're staying around, because you got to see, you got to be the kid. You got to do this whole thing." And like it's so quick and so Riggs, and Riggs goes back in, and you get this moment with Leo, who is like just like, I've accepted kind of thing in a way. Like he already knows he's accepted, but it's like that again, earnest cheesiness, which I love. I love about so much. So
when he turns and he hugs him, it's just the best moment. Like I love that moment. And
yeah,
again, I think Pesci, to his credit, the character of Leo is a little one note,
100%.
but he gets to add dimension to Leo in a way that he never got to before in this one. And I think that that's really special at the very end. Like he doesn't get a lot to do. And again, Chris Rock kind of takes over the fast talking Leo Getz type character throughout the movie because Butters is in it so much more frequently in like the action sequences and stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact that Getz gets like actual dimension by the time it's over is just, it's a testament to Donner looking at every one of those characters and going, everyone needs to have shown growth by the time the series is over.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes Leo. And so for him to get that moment is really great. And it just goes to show that he actually cared so much about the characters and his cast members that he was like, no one is left behind by the time this is over. Everyone will have showed some sort of growth. In, Riggs has been showing it for 4 movies, but like, let's give Leo his chance. Let's give Murtaugh the chance to come around on a lot of the ways he's been interacting with the people in his life too. Like, it's just nice.
It is.
And it just really works.
It really is. And it's, I don't even know what else we could say about this movie at this point. I think we've said pretty much it all.
I mean, it's just good. It's just fun. I really love this movie.
I do too. I will showcase one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about. It's a very Lethal Weapon-ish, which I find. There's a sequence in the middle between Murtaugh and Eddie Ko. They have this great watch fathers and a great connectivity. And it's a very dramatic sequence that is almost out of place in almost any other action movie. But in Lethal Weapons, it's par for the course. It's that really serious moment between them, and it pays off obviously later on when Jet Li ends up,
killing Hong,
Hong, and it spurs Murtaugh on again for more. It's great moments like that add to the Lethal Weapon franchise for me that make this a step above most action sequence movies in a way.
100%. I agree with you.
That.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you bring that up because it's actually very reminiscent to me of scenes like the boat sequence in Lethal Weapon 3.
Yep.
And like those very serious moments between Riggs and Murtaugh that the franchise has always leaned on.
Right.
That matters.
Yeah.
And the fact that they still have that here, very interestingly, a little less with Riggs and Murtaugh, other than obviously, again, the sequence after the sparring match.
Right.
But in these, it's a little different because they actually give them separate versions of that. One, again, we were just talking about Leo and Riggs. But then this one, to your credit, and I'm really glad you brought it up, is that scene between Murtaugh and Hong is really sweet and really beautiful. And it also kind of reminds Murtaugh like how much to care about his family and stuff too, which I think is really important in the scheme of the franchise.
Absolutely.
Grand scheme.
And I think honestly speaking, also it's the fact that we've had this again. This is the 4th movie, so we don't need as much of Riggs and Murtaugh having a sequence like that because we've seen it up before. It's like we've seen it, we know it. I mean, we get the little again with the sparring session, we get that brief moment here and there, and you just know it's there at this point. So to see them interacting this way with other people just adds a little more. It's like a bigger universe now. It adds out. It breaks itself out as the film goes outwards. And I think it's well rewarded. And that's what we're talking about when I meant that earnestness at the end. It earns that earnest, cheesy moments at the end because it just works.
It just works. And God damn, do I love these movies, man. And especially, like I said, for a movie that had such a bad production and it could have ended up being a Frankenstein's monster of a film, like this movie works just just in spite of all the issues. It could have been a disaster, and it is not. Like, again, if we had heard about the production of this movie while it was being made, people would have called this movie dead on arrival these days.
It's unbelievable to me. And like looking back at the reception now, it's kind of weird. I feel like this movie has aged. Some of the humor has not aged well, but I feel like the overall feeling of the film has gotten better.
Yeah, the reception's definitely
it was mixed.
It was kind to it.
Do you know Joe Pesci was nominated for a Razzie for Worst Supporting Actor for this?
What?
He was nominated.
Fuck the Razzie's number one.
Fuck the Razzie's number one. Exactly. But the fact that like I think he gave one of the performances of his career, like that's the Froggy sequence is one of the best performances. I shouldn't say best performances. He's had a long and storied career, but it's a really damn fine acting moment in there. How could that be worst supporting actor? I don't get it.
That blows my mind. I had no idea that he got hit with a Razzie nomination for that movie. That's fucking garbage.
Absolutely. It's like,
wow. I fucking hate the Razzies so much anyway, but like that is garbage.
Oh, me too. Me too.
But yeah, man, look, this movie, it rules top to bottom. All things being equal, the more we talk about it, the more I just don't want Lethal Finale. Especially as we've watched through all these and we've talked about them and we've done the show. I mean, we started the first podcast talking about the potential of 5 and whether we wanted it or not. And we were very back and forth about it. At the end of the day, I have come around to the idea that I will watch. I mean, if it comes out, we're both going to watch it. Let's be honest about that. But it just is what it is. There's no denying that.
Right.
I don't want it.
I don't want it either. I think it would take an extremely amazing pitch for me to be excited about it in that kind of way. It might be some kind of pitch out there that would work. I don't know what that is necessarily, but nothing I've heard is anything that I'm like, oh yeah, let's do it, because we do have the perfect finale. There's no reason to go further. I mean, Rocky V had a great finale when it comes to that, and then it did go further. It was good, but I'm hoping Lethal Finale could be Rocky Balboa potentially, but I don't feel like it would do any good to the franchise at this point. I think they are a little too old for this shit. But hey, you know what? Prove me wrong, guys. Prove me wrong. I'm always willing to take a chance on something.
Wow, look at you bartering with the universe to prove you wrong.
Prove me wrong. And just don't be a good day to die hard. Which is what I'm terrified of.
We've talked about that movie far too much for my liking today.
I know, fair enough.
Don't like that.
I think it's the one way. I think it's one of the few reasons we're kind of hesitant never doing Die Hard in this series, because I mean we'd have to actually cover that.
I'm gonna be honest with you, and I don't say this super frequently when we're doing things on here, but like I don't love tearing movies apart or talking about movies I don't love, because it becomes this becomes work, and that sucks. But it's also like one of those things for you and I. We're too close to the industry still for my liking at times to want to just go nuclear on a movie where I'm going to feel fucking terrible about it. And it becomes not fun. The Halloween Resurrection podcast is one of my least favorite things we've ever done, because I hate that movie so goddamn much that like recording it was kind of abysmal.
Yeah.
Like it was not fun.
No, it was not. I'm not going to lie.
And so like doing the Die Hard movies sounds great until you realize that we have to do that. And I just genuinely don't want to fucking talk about that movie, because what we could say has probably been said. What I'm going to say is not going to be nice, and it's just not going to be fun.
I agree. I think it's testament, unfortunately, to the world around us that negative commentary gets clicks and gets views, and people love watching people tear things apart. And we try to be positive on this channel, and I'm not gonna lie, I try to be realistic, I try to be real, I'm trying to just flout everything that's good. We have had our moments. Halloween Resurrection, we had the Annabelle experience as well. We were not too fond of Annabelle.
Yeah, but that one was a little more fun to record, at least. The Halloween Resurrection one was
tough. That was tough.
Really not fun.
Right. It's tough. And A Good Day to Die Hard would be tough as well, obviously. So it's probably going to be a long time before we ever decide to tackle that. I think it would probably eventually would because we just love the other one so much. It'll weigh it out, but
If
we'll
anyone
see what
wants to
happens.
hear my me wax poetic about how much I love Live Free or Die Hard and why I think it might actually secretly be the best sequel in that franchise, I guess we can do it. I just fear for the day when then I have to talk about a top, or I don't know if top is the right word, but it is in the top 10 worst movies I've ever seen,
Yeah.
which is A Good Day to Die Hard. And
It's funny
that's,
because I've only watched it once. I've only ever watched it once.
I have seen it, I have probably seen it 4 times. I saw it opening day. So I don't know if we're just going to talk about this real quick before we wrap this up. But when I saw it, the very first time I saw it was the day before Valentine's Day in 2013, I think, because I think that's when it came out.
Yeah.
AMC did a marathon of 1 through 5.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and it was like an all-day event, and they were
That's
like,
even
come and hang
worse.
out. And you're just like, it was finally seeing the first one on the big screen,
Right.
finally seeing the second one on the big screen, finally seeing the third one on the big screen, seeing the fourth one again on the big screen. And it's like all these movies are so good.
Right. And they
And then
follow
you
up with that.
fucking get to the fifth one, and that is how the day ends.
Oh, no.
Dude, and I was like, what the fuck just happened? It was so fucking bad. And I remember walking out going, what in the world just happened? Like, everything that could go wrong with a Die Hard sequel does in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is I actually did not see it in theaters. I watched it for the first time a few years later.
You fucking lucky asshole.
I don't know why I didn't see it because it's weird I didn't see it in theaters, but for whatever reason I missed it. I remember hearing so much worse shit about it. I guess like maybe that put me off on it. Eventually, I decided I was watching the saga, and I was like, "Oh God, here's the time to watch Good Day to Die Hard. It can't be that bad, right?" Oh no.
Oh, it's worse than it can be. And
The
the
funny
funny
thing is, to me, I almost do want to watch it again at some point, though, because like I said, I've only seen it once. In my head, I'm kind of like, it can't be that bad, can it?
No, it is.
But
It
it
really
is.
is that bad. I've watched it. My dad was like, I really want to watch it because I love Die Hard. I was like, all right. And my dad is like most dads of people our age. They just kind of like TNT movies that you put on in the background and they don't really care about the quality. And he has asked me to watch it with him like twice since. And I'm always like, why do you do this to me? Like, we could just watch literally any of the other ones. Like, anything else is better than this. So every once in a while, there will be times where I'll pull out like just abysmally bad sequels. And I haven't done this in a while, so maybe I'll do it soon. I used to do Twitter commentaries while I was drunk watching them.
Okay, there you go.
And I would get madder and drunker as I would go on as the movies would happen. So I would do like Mummy 3, I would do this, I would do like X-Men The Last Stand, just like really, really bad sequels that you just kind of have to watch every once in a while to remind yourself that I guess the world is a lot brighter than I remember, and like it could always be worse. You could be one of these movies. So maybe I'll do that, or maybe we'll do like we've never done it before, but maybe we could do like bad watch-alongs where it's just you and I don't necessarily love doing it, but I will definitely drink and Mystery Science Theater 3000 this shit if we have
There you
to.
go. There you go. That sounds good. I like that.
The time that I watched The Mummy 3 by
Oof.
myself drinking in my apartment in Anaheim, and I was doing a Twitter thread, and at one point one of my friends was like, you're going to get The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor trending on your own because you are just tearing this movie apart so hard. And this was like the early days of Twitter.
Right. Speaking of another movie that I've only seen once in my life is that one. I barely remember it, to be honest. I barely remember it.
Oh, you lucky asshole. I unfortunately remember everything about that movie, and it makes me angry. That's a bad movie, and it should feel bad.
It's not a movie I'm going to have to watch again at some point, though, because I got to figure it out.
You know how
myself.
bad that movie is? It killed the franchise. They were going to make a fourth one that never happened. Antonio Banderas was going to be the villain. They were going to go to Peru, and he was going to be like an Aztec mummy of some sort. It was going to be because they were trying to expand the horizons of the franchise, and then they were like, but we'll get Rob Cohen to direct a Mummy film, which was a choice that someone somewhere decided to make.
Yeah, that's definitely
That's the nice way of me saying, you fucking morons, what were you thinking? But boy, that is a bad fucking movie.
The Fast and the Furious is Rob Cohen?
You mean the movie? Yeah, The Fast and the Furious is Rob Cohen, and the dude who apparently decided, let's just have Jet Li be CGI for the entire movie, basically. And that movie is so over edited that this movie has Michelle Yeoh in it too, and there's an action between her and Jet Li that is so bad and so incomprehensible while you're watching it. It actually makes me angry, and I want to throw things.
I get it. I don't remember the sequence, but I got it. One more reason why I got to go back, and I'll give it a shot at some point. But it'd be funny if I love it. I'd laugh my ass off if I loved it. We had a conversation about it.
Cancel our podcast, and I would never do this with you again. I'm going to be honest with you. There's like lines in the sand that I will draw. It's like that. If you are going to go to bat for Dark Phoenix or The Last Stand, as X-Men is concerned, if you went to bat for A Good Day to Die Hard, like, I will draw the line in the sand. There will be no more two mediocre white dudes on film.
You know what? I'm going to say something you might hate. I don't exactly hate Dark Phoenix.
All right, that's it. That's enough out of you for the day. Let's wrap this shit up.
The rest I'm here for.
It was a year and a half of pretty decent content, and then you said that, and that's done. That's a wrap.
I would say I didn't love it. I was just kind of more indifferent.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear a goddamn word out of your mouth. You stop this right now. You do not defend that movie. You stop this right now.
I think it's fine.
No, you stop this right now. There is few things in the world where I'll be like, you are wrong. This is one of those moments. You are just wrong.
I think it's better than Apocalypse.
Yeah, Apocalypse sucks too. That's not a fucking high bar.
I agree, but
is it finally the time to have the conversation that like the X-Men franchise is actually wildly inconsistent for the most part, and like its lows are some of the biggest lows of all time. Yeah.
But
stop defending shit, Paul.
Heights are great. Hey, I don't defend shit. I'm not defending it per se. I'm just
called it fine. That is a defense of a mediocrely bad movie.
It's in our name, dude. It's in our name. We are mediocre.
Yeah, but we embrace that we're mediocre. That movie thinks it's like that movie wants to be Gandhi. That movie is not Gandhi. I hate that movie with like such a white hot intensity.
I think that's why
How did Hans Zimmer do the score for that movie?
I know he did. I think that's why I laugh about it so much. Is like you hate it so much, and people do hate it so much. And I watched it. I'm kind of like, I can't get passionate enough to hate it. That's all. You own it though, don't you?
Of course I do. I'm a completionist. It doesn't make me happy about it. I even own that shit on 4K. I own that turd bucket of a movie in the highest possible quality you can own it in.
Of course you do. Of course,
because I'm a psychopath and a glutton for punishment. That's just how this works. Of course I own it. I own every one of the Tremors sequels. What do you want from me? I own every direct-to-video Scorpion King movie because I am a glutton for punishment.
I can't wait to discuss the X-Men franchise at some point.
Oh boy. I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to be sober during any of the conversations about like half of them.
Fair enough. Although the heights are good though. I love First Class and Days of Future Past very much.
Well, Days of Future Past is, a masterpiece.
So. All right, but let's finish up with this week's podcast on Lethal Weapon 4. It's time to rate it. We didn't get a chance to rate it yet. Just a little reminder for what has come before. We both, out of 11, of course, because you always rank it things up to 11 here on PLD Projects, turn it up to 11. Lethal Weapon, I gave a 10.
Wants her say, apparently.
Obviously. I gave Lethal Weapon a 10. You gave it a 10.5. I gave Lethal Weapon 2 a 10.5. You gave it Lethal Weapon 2 a perfect 11.
Correct, because I'm right about this.
Okay, that's what you think. Okay, that's what we're going with here. Okay, Lethal Weapon 3, I gave a 7, and you gave a 7.5. So we dipped it down in quality a little bit. So I'm interested to hear what you think Lethal Weapon 4 is comparatively.
So, as we've kind of talked about it, and the more I think about it, I just love this movie. I just love it to pieces. I think it's so fucking good. And I think it has gotten better with age. I think it is a movie that understands at the end of the day what it needs to be in order to wrap everything up and say goodbye to a franchise and characters that people really love. I just think it's a really special movie. For me, I'm going to go ahead and give this guy an 8.5.
8.5. That's solid. Um, Interesting you say that, because I am actually going to give it a solid 9. I actually really enjoyed it that much, despite my misgivings, despite my Chris Rock misgivings of it all. I agree. I think this is the perfect franchise and capper. I think it steps its game way back up from Lethal Weapon 3 in my eyes. I do wish
I wish the story elements were better.
I do wish the story elements were better, and I wish we had action Laura Nicole in this one. But at the end of the day, the nostalgia side of it, the Joe Pesci the family ending, to me just works. It works on so many different levels. And Gary Sherman, Van Halen. So I'll give it a solid 9. I mean, that's a funny.
You know what? I'm going to bump mine up to a 9. I'm just going to tie you because I don't feel like having one day where I'm the one that's bumped underneath you. That seems weird.
It does seem weird. They say every other film you were 0.5 ahead of me until this one. So you're gonna cheat me with that now. You're gonna go up to 9. That's okay. I'll go with that. I'm okay with that.
Thanks.
Solid
I appreciate it. Solid 9 is good.
That means we end with me giving the franchise an average of 9.125. Your average was 9.5. So our average of the podcast was 9.3125.
That's really remarkable, actually. I got to say, that's solid stuff right there.
Yeah, that's a great franchise right there.
That's a great franchise right there. You see, even at its highs and lows, it still manages to be that good. And this is why we can never do Die Hard, because one of those is going to tank the overall franchise's quality so badly as an average.
So badly. Oh, man. I don't mean it's so bad because I want to see it, though. I do want to see it, but I just can't.
I know.
I just can't.
I get it.
I don't know. I want it to be I want it to be good for so many reasons. And
well, of course, we always want it to be good.
I know it didn't work out, but that's what it is. Oh well. All right, my friend. Where can the folks find you?
Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell, hanging out here doing all the podcasty fun things with PLD. Please check out our Scream 6 review and our thoughts on Scream 7. And also, that's it. That's it. I just wanted to say also, I forget I really don't have anything else to plug sometimes anymore. Like I almost want to say the movie Trivia Schmodown, but it's been a while.
It has been a while. We did have a little bit of a rote thing at the end of our shows before, so I get it. I want to throw out if this is the first time here, please hit that like, hit the subscribe on that modest goal to 500. We are moving slowly but surely towards that goal. If you do like the channel even more, feel free to join us on patreon.com/PLD Projects. Got a great Facebook chat. Got a great smash of content. We give at some point some hangouts, etc. Maybe we'll do some drunk watch-alongs of bad movies. Maybe that's something that'll happen. We got.
It might have to at this point. We keep hyping it up. We got to do it.
Absolutely. Specifically, want to shout out Maddie Kearns, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, John Lestrina, and the rest of you. It really helps me keep the lights on. So I really appreciate you guys. A lot of great stuff happening on the channel. Of course, we got this is Thursday. You're hearing this on Thursday. So yesterday we had Holy Snokes, myself and Matty Gunner, talking The Mandalorian, Bad Batch, and all things Star Wars. And Matty Gunner's going to Celebration. So we're hopefully going to have some live on the Celebration floor updates as only we can do. We got class action on a bi-weekly basis. That's going to be a lot of fun, where me, Matty, and Richard R. Jarvie put up movies, actors, directors up against each other, custom-made categories to see which one is victorious. On PLD Projects, the Crown Jewels YouTube channel, I do have Crown Jewels, a journey through Queen. Every song in the Queen franchise. That's a lot of fun there as well. Of course, we got a couple new podcasts coming out. Harris Don's coming out in the late spring or early summer, where I'm going to be going through Ed Harris's franchise, and also review. Myself and Lego going to be going through the V franchise, my favorite TV sci-fi franchise of the 80s, and we'll go through all of them. A special episode 0 kind of thing going to go on with that. next Tuesday, or this Tuesday coming up, I'm going to be giving you a interview I did with Kenneth Johnson, the original writer, creator, and director of V. He was gracious enough to give me some time. We had a fun interview talking mostly about V, since it is the 40th anniversary. We also touched base on the Incredible Hulk and things of that nature as well. So definitely tune in to that. Otherwise, you can find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter if you want to comment at me. I'm always loving a good conversation. But I think that's it, though. I think that's pretty much everything. So,
God damn, dude. Nice to have so much to plug.
I know. Dude, it's busy. It's busy. But until next time, my friends, stay mediocre.
Bye, friends.
Bye now.